host for another FLF, where FLF is Friday Life Factories, which is a monthly event we hold where we'll be hosting an Iraqi entrepreneur who is top in their fields, and they will be sharing their experience and tips about what they do. This month's topic is all about Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is a subject which a lot talked about but rarely understood. This time we'll host another entrepreneur, which is Osama Amir, who's founder of many tech startups and now works as an advisor for Web 3.0 and Green Tech. His companies were based in New Zealand, and now he also works in the UK. I want to welcome Osama with us. Osama, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and I'm sure our viewers will be happy with the views that we will share.
شكرا جزيلا أحمد. Thank you so very much. مساء الخير يا أهل العراق. Good evening everyone, and thank you for making it at such short notice. اسمي أسامة عامر، والد من بغداد، ودا أشتغل بالweb 3 and blockchain space. I'm just a curious character who left Baghdad when I was just 2 years old. I moved to New Zealand, where Mamiti or Babiti, and grew up there. And I was always meant to be a doctor, of course, just like my brother and my parents. But I decided to go down a different path and follow my curiosities, and they've led me to many places. And right now I'm passionate about leveraging breakneck technologies to make positive impacts and changes wherever possible. So I'm very pleased to be here, and shukran jazilan again to you, Ahmed and Zahra, for inviting me along. I'm so pleased to be here.
I think the doctor and engineer path is the dream of every Iraqi parent, but we all go for different directions. The thing is, we've listened a lot about Web 3.0, we've heard a lot about it, and there's a lot of speculation about it, but it's rarely understood. And we want just to clarify, what is Web 3.0?
Yeah, fantastic. So we want to think about Web 3 as the internet the way that it was originally intended to be designed by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He said it himself. In fact, it's a back-end revolution whereby all of the back-ends of all of the systems are now composable, and all of the data can be shared and seen and accessed by different protocols and applications on the front end. So I've got some slides that I'd love to share in a couple of minutes to go through. And yeah, I want to keep this as interactive as possible. So this stuff is just to call out. Don't worry, I'll share these afterward. And feel free to drop any questions as we go. So yeah, we want to think of Web3 like a global trust layer, essentially. It'll enable collaboration and trust in a low trust environment. It'll mean that I can do business with people without knowing who they are, or where they're from, or having to bring any kind of judgments to the fray other than what I can see and enforce on chain. So just going back a bit, why do we need a Web 3? Where are we at with Web 2? We're going all the way back to Web 1 with the ARPANET that was deployed by the US military, and the very early internet, lots of you guys might remember. It was a one-way internet. It was read-only, meaning that people could publish data and articles, and it was an information revolution, democratized access to information, but it was a one-way system. Right now, and around the 2000s, we gained the ability to, in about 2005, and this is still sort of where we are, we enabled the read and write functionality. So this is what we're doing right now. We're actually writing to the web as well. And you think hyperlinks and social networks starts to establish all sorts of connections between people, and disintermediated all kinds of business models, enables people to do business. But in fact, what's critical to remember here is that it effectively centralized the power of the internet into a few platforms in terms of your Googles, your Amazon, your Facebooks, your Shopifys, all of these. And what's happened now is that all of the subsequent and associated value of all of the data and information that we are creating and generating is going to these organizations. And certainly about 50% of total internet traffic was by 2020 flowing through Google, Amazon, or Facebook's methods, depending on where you use Netflix, Microsoft, and Apple. So we've become dependent and reliant on this peer-to-peer interaction via the internet, which is fantastic, but hence the Web3. What the Web3 does is it creates a value layer, and this is done via a blockchain. A blockchain is like a giant receipt written in steel, and there's thousands and thousands of copies of this receipt being maintained all over the world. And these are what's called the nodes, which secure the blockchain and get various rewards in exchange for it. There are several kinds of blockchains, and we'll talk about them later, these layer one chains. But certainly at a primitive, it has better data security and privacy. It's more personalized, but without the ads we've come to associate with personalization. It has better automation and higher productivity. And certainly the promise of it is that everything that you do on the web will actually earn you value. And you can co-own the platforms that you deliver value to. So I was like, sign me up to those primitives about 6-7 years ago, because, value creation is, collaboration is humanity's most important tool. So what we're talking about when we talk about Web3 primitives and data democracy and decentralization is we're talking about the ability to maintain a shared ledger of truth and not have to rely on a centralized entity or a government, for example, to maintain our truth for us, to maintain our store of value, for example, Bitcoin as an example, to maintain the applications that we run, for example, Ethereum or Solana or lots of these other layer one blockchains. And trust is really important here, right? I think the recent report by McKinsey said all industries basically have a lower than 50% trust rate, unsurprisingly, especially the ones that love to milk us dry. And so what is a smart contract, and what does data democracy actually mean? So what we want to build is like a trustless environment where trust is never called into question, which is what the blockchain kind of enables. And also blockchain is peer-to-peer. So we're taking out these intermediaries so that Ahmed and Osama can talk to each other and do business directly, rather than having to trust an intermediary or a centralized institution. And therefore, we also eliminate a single point of failure, which also means that there's no censorship. The blockchain is what's called permissionless. It's quicker and it's more secure to create business transactions on. And so a smart contract is a kind of self-enforcing contract based on any kind of parameters that we can define from the outside. So let's say we want to do a business deal, we put something in escrow, and we can put in an API from a system which is called an oracle, which brings in off-chain data onto a blockchain, and then the contract can enforce itself. So when you think about the fact that banks, for example, think of a bank, 70% of a bank's cost and the overheads associated with running a bank are compliance. The people behind the compliance, in fact, these manual checks, AML, all this kind of thing. Of course, everyone will have heard all these terms. So 70% of a bank's overhead cost is in fact compliance. And this can be solved by blockchains. So in fact, this is what we're talking about when we say that these web ecosystems can then also be owned by the builders and users. So these things are also orchestrated with tokens as well, which you'll hear quite a lot about, and we can come back to. But the token economy is a key part of enabling this. These tokens effectively give you property rights. Tokens can represent almost anything. They can represent a bit of virtual land, or they could also represent a share in a piece of real land or real physical investments. And these are already happening today. A token can represent a utility for a service that you would use online. So you can pay a token in what's called a gas fee to use a blockchain-based service permissionlessly and trustlessly, which is also fantastic. So we also control what happens with all of our data, and there's a real sort of fluidity of network and information. But the implications for all this are quite prescient in that loyalty then becomes a super scarce resource and almost a business imperative. So the entry barriers are lowered, and it promotes this open source and collaborative environment. So this is also fantastic. You guys will be familiar with the principles of open source, which I'm a huge advocate and a fan of. Open source is fantastic, and it's really, again, the way that the internet was originally envisaged. It drives humanity a lot faster when things are open source. So let's take banks again for an example, guys. When you think about banking networks, there's 5,000 banking networks across the world. Almost every single one of them, or let's say 1,000 of them, have spent hundreds of millions of dollars developing their own proprietary infrastructure from scratch to do essentially the same things everywhere in the world. Or they're contracting out to various SaaS-based solutions more recently, and only more recently in the last 10 to 20, sort of 10 years, they're contracting their infrastructures out. But these are incredibly slow-moving, ingrained institutions. And they're keeping all of their code and all of the things they've developed behind silos because they say, well, this is our code. We've developed this. But what's the point of developing the same thing 1,000 times? And so this is where open source comes into play. And it's why the blockchain space and blockchain applications can move, develop, and evolve at the speed of light. And it's why the speed of innovation will actually not be slowing down, and it'll actually be increasing because everything is open source.
So we have Web 3.0, which is a more democratized web, a more open source web, a more secure web, and it's also more efficient in terms of it's open source, and everyone can contribute to it, and everyone can actually own a part of the operations that they do, and there is no centralized authority like a big tech company or the government that can control the flow of information. Is that I think that's what you were meaning for it?
Yes, precisely.
So it's a fascinating subject, and we in Iraq, a lot of new technologies have been used, and a lot of new initiatives are what you call disruptive technologies are coming to fray, and they're helping the developing companies, the developing countries, to catch up with the global pace of innovation. How does Web 3.0, or how can Web 3.0 help entrepreneurs and people in countries like Iraq, basically? You mentioned the more democracy in the web, you mentioned more open source. Is there any particular cases that it's more helpful for countries like Iraq than for other countries?
Yes, I would say so, yes. So when we look at financial institutions and the way that payments, for example, ebb and flow, we have all sorts of complicated payment architectures across the world. And these, change for various reasons at various times. And I've only heard a little bit about the issue so far, but from the tip of the iceberg, what I understand is that it severely enables digital Iraqi talent to get paid in Iraq internationally. So there's a huge use case right there on its own in terms of payments. So that's the kind of first use case that we would mention. It's kind of payments, getting paid. The other one that we would look at, and the way that we want to think about it, is we want to think about reputation in a pseudonymous manner. So currently, when you're hiring or working with people or freelancers, if you're a digital native and you work in digital jobs, you don't often mind like where they are. They can be based anywhere. It doesn't really matter like where they're from. But there are some cases and some platforms, as I've heard, which will censor people just based on their region, on their nationality and their location, which is again something that's completely against the ethos of the blockchain space, which has come out as a permissionless collaborative environment. And so we have platforms like what's called Brain Trust, for example, which is a decentralized version of an elite decentralized version of Upwork, for example, where you can hire the top talent, they get paid in stable coins, and you can build what's called a non-fungible reputation on chain. And so the future of work is coming in as a mercenary, looking at boards of Web3 based coordination tools, which kind of look like Trello or Asana or Jira or any of these tools you might be familiar with. You're able to pop in and see what's going on for Compound or Filecoin or any of these big protocols and infrastructure. They have decentralized builders programs already where you can pop in, you can see what's going on, you can apply, you click a button, it creates a thread between you and the person responsible for that task. And it doesn't matter where you're from. And then when you complete the task, you get paid simply in tokens, you get paid on chain, you get paid in stable coins, you can be incentivized in the protocol's native token, and you can build more investment with that token over time. You don't need to know who these people are. They don't need to know who you are. This is so common in the Web3 space. It's about what you bring to the table. And so when we talk about Web3, we want to say that it's not anonymous because it's important to have a basis of understanding of who someone might be, but it's actually pseudonymous. So my one of my Web3 identities is just Osama. Like I can just be Osama.eth, or it doesn't matter who the person is behind or where they're actually from. And you can start to build what's called a non-fungible reputation on chain, where people can see evidence of the fantastic work that you've done. And they don't need to know who the person is behind. You can have a picture or an avatar. So again, this idea of identity and overcoming limitations that are placed on people who are being told that because of identity traits that they can't change, that they might be able to dispose it for some reason. So this is part of the empowerment and part of the space as well.
Very interesting, especially for I think this is music to Iraqi entrepreneurs, because it basically solves most of our common issues, which is the payment issue and the prejudice issue, and also sanctions or legacy sanctions that prevents us from accessing many of the international platforms. And having this would definitely remove a lot of prejudice against countries like Iraq and talented Iraqis.
Yeah, exactly. And it's coming like a waterfall, really. And you can just use your gaming handle essentially. I use Espresso. Oftentimes, Espresso. Doesn't matter, who the person is behind that at the end of the day. So this is, again, part of the ethos of the kind of digital, this kind of young digitally enabled, doesn't matter, what's behind the keyboard type thing, and all of these kinds of spaces. So you can choose, you can choose whether to reveal identities, but you also don't need to do that. I have people who I worked with for a couple of years, and I don't know their true identities.
That's perfect. I think it's more about what they do bring to the table, as you said, and not about who they are. Web 3.0 is actually not a new concept, but a new technology, which is brought up with the advent of the popularization of blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, and all of that. How did you get into the Web 3.0 scene? And what drove you to become part of that?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned payments, I think as well. Again, I had just been working on my first startup in New Zealand called Journey, which was an insurtech SaaS company. And on leaving that, I wanted to do something a little bit more impactful. And I got together with a couple of guys I knew, and we started brainstorming what some of the biggest problems in New Zealand were. And we realized that we have huge problems in New Zealand with highest rate of youth suicide in the developed world, and 80% of the bird species are endangered, etc. So this was something that the guys on the ground were passionate about. And then we looked at something else. We were like, okay, how can we help solve these issues with something where people have an everyday touch point and a feeling for that? So we looked at the payment space, and we realized that the payment card fees in New Zealand were about 12 times higher than the next country down on average. And that the schemes, which were Visa and MasterCard, were making an enormous profit, by far the highest per region for the resources that they put in. And this is because most of the banks, the 80% of the New Zealand's banking infrastructure is owned by Australia. And so there's no incentive to reduce merchant fees. And so there was a tune of about $1 billion going offshore just on fees just for card fees. So we wanted to use blockchain and Web3, blockchain technology to create a more efficient payments method for small merchants and people paying each other in New Zealand. And so we developed a QR code-based payment rail, which we integrated with terminals and terminal providers in New Zealand. So merchants could surface a QR code on a terminal, and then a user would be able to scan that, and then we would have a settlement in the back end in the most effective and efficient way possible using New Zealand dollar and the legacy banking system that they had there. And we would be recording all of these transactions on a blockchain, and it ended up being more to future-proof the system. So I kind of got in backwards into the space, and that's the kind of rabbit hole that I ended up diving down, and got into regulated financial services after that, and kept going on the Web3 side. So started working across DeFi, and then got very interested in decentralized governance. And of course, now the upcoming metaverse opportunity is extremely interesting as well. So again, metaverse, giant opportunity, fantastic space, growing at a 60% compound annual growth rate from now until 2030. The narrow opportunity market looks like $1 trillion annually by 2030. The wide opportunity, which includes open identity, non-fungible reputation, all of these areas, and augmented reality as well, it's a 10 trillion annual opportunity by 2030. So metaverse is a wider thing. We're looking at it as this huge opportunity and enabler, and it really aligns with my personal ethos as well. This would be a good time to mention, I harp on about identity a lot. So obviously, my name is Osama Amir, and I was just 9 years old when the 9/11 attacks happened, and I was living in the US at the time with my family. I was just a kid, just a young boy, and I started being teased everywhere I went. And so I changed my name to Aussie on paper because I didn't want to deal with institutionalized prejudice. And still, when I go to the US, I still honestly get border guards saying, "Oh, you're born in Baghdad. Why are you born in Baghdad? What do you mean? What do you mean? Why am I born in Baghdad? Like, what are you talking about?" So it's just hugely sad, and it just really deeply irks me that I had to change my name on paper to not have to deal with institutionalized prejudice, and that really stuck with me. And that's been a driver, I think, as well, and it's why I'm so bullish on this opportunity.
That's really unfortunate, and I think that's the case with many of our peers, and even in the Middle East, the wider region, in terms of prejudice, in terms of access to opportunities, and in terms of some acts that prevent us from getting what we deserve in a lot of cases. And I'm quite optimistic too about the Web 3.0 and also the metaverse opportunities, where we can just move on from this dark part of human history to just a new part where we can have a skill-based or an inner-person-based approach to culture and approach to each other, rather than just your background that makes people judge you. And I think also, do you think that the way that you came into the Web 3.0, or the industry as a whole, where you went from the regulated financial systems in a backward way, as you mentioned, does that give you a unique view in terms of how those institutions think and how to best approach them?
Yes, exactly. There's nothing like learning from the inside and taking down institutions from the inside. I don't want to fly a flag. I don't actually have a flag to fly right now. I'm just moving. I'm just moving house. But I would fly a flag if I could. Yeah, I think the best way is to learn the limitations of the system, understand how the system is evolving. For example, open banking. For example, regulated financial services. How these things are evolving, and understand then where the jump is that you can identify, and how you can address that jump there as well. And so working with executive suites of top banks in New Zealand, and working with regulators as well in New Zealand and in Europe as well, closely understanding what this all takes, how to change industries slowly, but also how slowly these industries change, and the requirements and the biggest pain points and this kind of thing has been hugely beneficial, definitely. And it's been an on purpose thing to do. So we're not jumping in from a sort of cowboy left field side. Because again, you can think of Web3 and the tools, that it gives, and the permissionless platforms and operating systems of, for example, issuing tokens, issuing NFTs, all of this kind of thing, in lots of ways. And this happens when you create any new technology. You're going to have, huge waves of people abusing it, rug pulling other people, scams, and, at broad daylight, left, right, and center, hugely self-interested, and bring out the worst parts of people, really, as well. Which is hugely, hugely unfortunate. And it's like giving, it's like giving everyone a magic wand, and but we're not going to tell you how to use it. So you're going to get, I'm going to say, for example, someone's selling an NFT collection. They say we've got 10,000 photos of Ahmed. They're fantastic. They're amazing. We promise you they're the best pictures ever. And everyone gets really excited. And then, on the reveal, and then it's just a picture of me, for example. Everyone's like, whoa, we didn't want to see that, So again, with this permissionless state. And so that's why, again, loyalty and trust becomes such a scarce and important resource as well, in these environments. And you have to be extremely careful and keep your wits about you. The whole trustless nature of things, it really is trustless. But at the end of the day, don't be fooled. Lots of the big protocols are, in fact, run in the back office. DAOs and these kinds of things are still run on a handshake between VCs who own big chunks of tokens. And again, this is, the Jack Dorsey argument, where he's saying it's only marginally better. The Ethereum ecosystem, for example, where you have a few VCs that, own huge swathes of tokens, and even they're trying to work out how they make it feel a bit more decentralized and, actually live up to the ethos that they kind of set out to kind of build.
So there's also some background things that are happening in terms of that. But I think the community as a whole is more aware, or will be more willing to fight back in that regard. You're talking about brain trust as an example of what Web 3.0 can bring. Are there any other life examples that we can view or we can interact with regarding Web 3.0 being used?
Yeah. I would say, we've got different areas. We've got different areas of the space. I would say, we have the entire DeFi and decentralized finance space. We have a lot of primitives there. So what we're talking about when we talk about DeFi and decentralized finance. So let's look at some of these protocols here. So we look at Aave, Compound, and Curve, and let's say Uniswap, for example. These are sort of these blue chip DeFi protocols, and what they are commoditized financial services. They are completely commoditized financial services, meaning where you would previously need a bank as a trusted intermediary that enforces loans, when loans go bust or dry, or when collateral, dips below, your liquidation ratios. You previously had banks and financial institutions having to enforce that and taking huge amounts of cut for doing that. Now you have these protocols which run via smart contracts alone. They fully run on smart contracts connected to front ends, and they're composable, meaning that you can embed them across anything else, and they're extremely easy to integrate. Same here with Curve and Uniswap. So you have some of these primitives which are fantastic. Another one is Filecoin, for example, and Arweave, which are both fantastic protocols. They enable you to eliminate reliance on one centralized data storage provider. And in some cases, they can even be cheaper than your classic data storage providers in the backend. And so they enable you to permanently store data forever on blockchains. And it's stored in a distributed manner across a number of different incentivized nodes. And so it's opened up the data storage market. It's opened it up completely. It means that you or me or anyone here can share a load of data, data storage capacity, and be paid for it as well. So you don't have to be a giant provider with a shitload of infrastructure. You can just do it in a small way and do it on your own. So again, storage is another great space. Let's talk about what have we? Identity. So these are sort of low level examples, but this is kind of relevant to the team as well, and in developing nations, and it's one to watch out for. You would have heard about digital identity, which is this big thing that's being thrown around as this hugely efficient and effective mechanism of governments being able to let you store all of your health and academic data, so that if you need to leave your home in a hurry for whatever reason because you're being attacked or you just want to run away, you have all of your data securely on this digital identity system. And what's actually great about digital identity is that you can have what's called provable provable viewing. So you can have it so that you can actually provably know when people have actually viewed the data. So think of it like a tree, like a big tree. Think of your digital identity like this giant tree, right? It's got all of your data on it: your health data, your academic transcripts, your financial data, your financial history, all of that. Think of it like that. And I can choose to share one leaf with Ahmed, and one leaf of one branch, for example, let's say health. I can choose to share one tiny bit of it with Ahmed because it's needed to get a prescription, or to show something, or to show a piece of academic transcript. The leaf or the seed that I share with Ahmed, I actually can then also know when Ahmed has actually viewed that particular piece of information, because it's a unique seed that's generated that I can, or a unique leaf, for example, or a unique view into one leaf that's generated. And I can know when an organization or an individual who I've shared that with accesses that information. So that's fantastic. It's really powerful. We can choose which bits of our data we want to share at different times with different people. But the debate and the issue is that governments, of course, have identified this, and they're all building their own systems in order to enable digital identity, and we just don't know, what that can create. So we're walking a very fine line at the moment with digital identity, and overall, it's a good thing. But a decentralized digital identity, which is truly decentralized, is the real vision, and has been the vision for the entire space. So there's lots of people building towards this. So let's talk about identity. Gaming. Again, gaming is a fantastic example, right? So we can have what's called play to earn. So you guys might have heard about Axie Infinity, for example. Axie is a great example. So it had these, you have these embedded tokenomics within your games, and it's all underpinned by NFTs. And NFTs are, you can think of NFTs as an operating system. An NFT isn't just one NFT, it's like an operating system. And the operating system enables you to store, trade, and prove any kind of non-fungible value. Non-fungible meaning unique value. So think of it as an operating system. NFTs mean that I can, for example, take World of Warcraft gold and make them composable and use them to buy a Nike shoe chip, or trade them for something in a different game, for example. So you can retain the value and all those grinding hours that you've played, Pokemon with, and you can take them to a different game, and you can just port them to something else really easily. So what NFTs are doing are bringing liquidity to previously illiquid markets. So that's what we're doing with NFTs. So you can think of them like an operating system. And so let's go back to Axie Infinity. The game and its tokenomics were so prolific for a while that people in the Philippines were able to earn something like 600 USD per month just from playing Axie Infinity full time. And now the token price has obviously crashed, and so now it's going to be significantly less than that, probably 50 times less than that, for example, or at least 10 times less. I wouldn't know the exact number, but it's much less. They actually suffered an attack on some of their nodes as well, which was interesting. So they had 9 nodes running their blockchain, their Ronin chain, and someone managed to actually compromise 5 out of the 9 nodes. And they were able to, steal pretty much a giant chunk of the protocol's value and just, whisk it away and steal it through the blockchain. So, we're talking about all these different levels that kind of come together.
But that's actually quite interesting in terms of monetizing things that before weren't able to be monetized, like your gaming skills. If you're an artist, your art, and
Yes.
if you're a content writer, your content, or like you're also privatizing your digital or securing your digital identity. So these are quite great examples, and I'm quite sure a lot of people will be able to benefit a lot from that. And we will also be sharing the links for the slides with the viewers.
Of course.
And you mentioned about the attack on some of these platforms or some of these use cases,
Yes.
and how we want to know how private and secure is Web 3.0 in terms of being able to prevent such attacks, being able to secure more uh, your identity. Is
Yeah.
it more secure than the current infrastructures that we have, or is it more secure in terms of the infrastructure as a whole, and how do we protect our identity?
Yeah. So, so these things are, going to be digital nation states, quite frankly, and more people are already kind of spending more and more time on them and online. And I think the clear big risks to Web3 generally are cybersecurity first and foremost. So while smart contracts themselves, right, the smart contract itself is actually much safer. It's in fact. Much safer than a lot of Web 2 contracts and encryption data. You hear about it a lot, right? So basically, a smart contract has been hacked, X amount of money has been forked from or exited from a community. And then there's lots of questions around the legality of those smart contracts because there's currently not a lot of them protected by law or completely fragmented across jurisdictions and everything. So there's huge questions about all this stuff, which are slowly but surely, coming into fruition. So, what's concerning is there's these platforms. They can be hugely centralized. They're dependent on centralized infrastructure. So let's think about OpenSea, for example, or MetaMask. MetaMask, for example, stopped allowing, because it's a front end, it's software, it's still dependent on centralized infrastructure. Same with OpenSea, all these things, which are the key platforms for some of these things. It's really going against, weirdly, against the ethos of decentralization. And they're creating little sandwich areas for attacks, because the legality is not so clear around what data can be shared or not. Like we have GDPR or data protection, from governments when it comes to real Web 2 data, but we don't have any of that when it comes to blockchain-based data. And so, people can be, racking data left, right, and center, selling it. It just came out that Coinbase was selling people's blockchain transaction data to, in fact, selling it, monetizing it to the ICE, the immigration police of the US. That just came out today. So, in fact, it's a wild, wild west. And this is the other thing with open source, right? When you publish your code openly, you're opening it up for attack. You completely are opening it up for attack because you're publishing your source code. So if someone finds a flaw in your code, they can just steal, they can just break it. They can just break the protocol, find a way to break it, and steal, huge swathes of people's value away. So it really is still Wild West days out there. So you have to have your wits about you. You have to be super safe. You have to have a hardware wallet, for your for large amounts of assets. Otherwise, you can use something like Argent, which is a fantastic wallet, maybe instead of MetaMask, which is a bit played out. Argent, again, .xyz. Super secure, super fantastic. Again, you want a non-custodial platform. You don't want to hold your crypto with one of the exchanges. The exchanges get hacked left, right, and center. You think about Mt. Gox, which is the original Bitcoin exchange that got hacked, and everyone lost now what's worth zillions of billions of Bitcoin value, just like that. Poof. So this happens left, right, and center. So there's all sorts of attacks. In fact, there's also front-running attacks. So you can think of Ethereum. Ethereum is really interesting, right? So whereas Bitcoin is just a giant spreadsheet that consumes as much energy as I think it's Finland or more, right? So it's literally just a Google spreadsheet. It's just moving little numbers around left, right, and center, right? That's what Bitcoin is. Fine, no worries. I have feelings about Bitcoin. I like it as a kind of perhaps a relative measure of what people owe each other across the world, or how relative measure of obligations, or just a hardcore it just does one thing, just numbers. So maybe we need it. Maybe this is what's going to hedge us against the central bank digital currency future, which could not look that good potentially, or be very controlled. Ethereum runs computer code. And so that was the breakthrough that Vitalik and the Ethereum team made when they wanted to evolve on top of Bitcoin. They said, okay, cool, Bitcoin's good for one thing, which is just moving numbers around. We don't want to run computer programs on top of it. We need a new blockchain that's able to handle the throughput of running real computer code. And they wrote the language in something called Solidity, which is something that developers can learn today and get paid huge amounts of money to code. If they this is a fantastic thing to try to learn Solidity, the Ethereum-based language. It works with any Ethereum virtual machine compatible layer 1 blockchain as well. So you can code on Solana, you can code on Avalanche, you can code on all of these other layer 1 blockchains which are compatible with the Ethereum virtual machine. You can learn Solidity. There's some blockchains there where you can code in Rust, or you can code in, if you're fancy, you can try to code in Haskell, or if you think you're a professor or something like that. So yeah, again, Ethereum runs computer code. And so you can have these unstoppable, unmolestable applications that are running like these DeFi protocols and this kind of thing on top. But because when you transmit a transaction to the Ethereum blockchain, it transmits to all of the nodes. What happens is it waits in a queue before it gets mined by a miner. So I transmit my transaction to the blockchain, to the Ethereum chain, and it's waiting in the queue, and it's got a gas fee attached to it, and so it's going to be picked up by a miner at one point very soon. Let's say I put a high gas fee, it's going to be picked up very quickly. In that time, there's in fact thousands and thousands of everything from bots to actual people to all sorts of things waiting to see if they can front run your trade. And this is what's called the MEV problem, or the miner extractable value problem, whereby already 500 million of value so far in the last year has been extracted by people front running other people's transactions on Ethereum. So it's what's called a dark forest. So you can say there's people like, oh, there's goblins or there's monsters in the dark forest. So when you send a transaction out, there is this risk, if it's a very high value transaction, that it can be front run by someone else. So you have these kinds of risks still prevalent.
Could you explain to our viewers what exactly front running is, and how it is done by those monsters at the dark forest?
Yeah. I will. So this stuff is getting it's getting more advanced. The stuff is stuff. So what I'll do is I'll actually share some reading and some information on how these things work. But what's called sandwich attacks, where whereby if people identify arbitrage opportunities, they have bots that are waiting to come in, and they will pay a higher gas fee for them to execute the transaction instead of you. And so you might not lose value, but you might lose out on a huge opportunity, for example. And then there's other ways of your assets and things being rug pulled or stolen from you. This is by people putting fraudulent websites out there, making you connect your MetaMask and making you sign or transmit a transaction there, where in the code of the transaction of the smart contract, it's actually just stealing all of your stuff. And so there are automations. Security is a huge priority right now, making the front end better. And creating tools that will read the code of the smart contract automatically, because it's a very standardized code, Solidity. So people are creating AI tools and this kind of thing that are going to read the code for us automatically and say, don't click this, like essentially do not click this. So there's that. But here on the right, guys, we have what I like to call this is how you can build your journey. And so tier one, right? You want to, we go from cupcake down to the real flame stuff down here. And down at tier 5, we have the MEV, the minor extractable value. We've got a lot of stuff here actually on tier 4, but this is a really nice framework to see what you can understand. So you can roll through this framework and you can say, cool, I understand everything on tier 1, tier 2, I'm getting into tier 3. Let's learn about, what's the scalability trilemma for blockchains? What's a Bitcoin halving? What's protocol on liquidity and automated market makers, right? And you can roll down and then you can learn about layer 2 scaling solutions for Ethereum, front runners, Sybil attacks. We're talking more about this stuff down here. So it was just something I thought to mention, but there's way more low level, scams and hacks, happening left, right, and center. So, again, we're talking about some of this stuff here, but, you guys jump here and use this as a kind of guide. And again, on the left here are some of the some of the top projects which you can look into a little more and kind of learn a little bit more about. I will share links that are live. I have a link where you're actually able to click into each one of these and learn everything about it as well. So I'm going to share a little resource pool for you guys.
That's quite useful, and I think also for the security concerns, they like this chart and similar charts would be quite useful for our viewers, especially since this it gets more difficult to trust something that you don't understand, and this will be part of understanding what the security concerns are and how to avoid them.
Exactly.
You mentioned.
Sorry. The last piece of advice I'll give, which is a bit of a meme, is like, when you're talking about like DeFi and yield and this kind of thing, if you don't understand where the yield is coming from, you probably are the yield. This is a Confucius says meme, where it's like, if you don't understand where the yield is coming from, you are the yield. So, keep your wits about you. And the other one is, just like, my door is literally to you guys. So, Ahmed, I'll put my details on the end of the presentation that I share. You guys, please feel free to email me, reach out, as you guys start your Web3 journeys, or if you're already on it and you want to progress, or if you have questions, I'm very happy to point you guys in the right direction. So, that's what it's about.
Thank you. That's quite an informative slides and a quite informative session. For my last question, what are the career opportunities that has what people brought about? You mentioned Solidity, like people who go now into the Solidity side, it will be more profitable and there's not demand on programmers in that regard. What are the general opportunities that Iraqis can benefit from and generate income in Web 3.0?
Yeah. So, again, you can apply your normal digital skills at a baseline. So everything from UX and, UI, user research and user flows and this kind of thing. It's very normal. But what you can now also start getting into is what's called like community management and this kind of thing, which is great. So you can actually join one of these decentralized communities, and you can be involved with forums. You can be involved with moderation, this kind of thing for people who want to leverage their English skills and all of that, or even if there's protocols that are local, that are in Arabic, Arabic, تقدر تسوي نفس الشيء. هم تقدر تدخل. You can be a moderator, you can be a community manager, you can bring, if you're a social person, you can bring teams together, you can bring the remote ethos to it. So if you think about it, like, there's a lot of resource, and there's a lot of value there, and there's a lot of value that people want to protect as well, and they want to grow. There are so many Web3 based job boards and this kind of thing for people to join. There's Alliance DAO, which is based on just Web3 jobs. There's all sorts of accelerators for people who want to start new businesses. The layer one protocols, the big ones themselves, like Avalanche and Solana, who are trying to compete with Ethereum, have enormous hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that they're giving, to startups and teams who are coming to the fray with new ideas and innovations to try to build something new. Then for music as well, let's think about music. So right now, musicians get totally rolled by Spotify. They get paid absolutely nothing. I have good friends who are musicians. They are turning 30 and they want to give up their music careers, even though they're incredible musicians, because they make, a few thousand dollars a year off their music. They can only make it off live gigs. So what NFTs and decentralized proper music streaming platforms will be able to do is enable people to invest in the future of artists that they like. So you can think about your 1%, your true fans. Same with NFTs and artists as well yourselves. You can monetize your true fans and you can take them on a journey. So you think about it like when you put a photo on iStock at the moment, or any of these platforms, you don't know who's downloaded it. You don't know who's paid for it. They've taken all of your IP rights essentially away from you. Whereas with the Web3, you can see who, and again, it's pseudonymous. So it's not like, I don't say Ahmed has been listening to all my music and jamming out to it. I can just see a wallet address essentially. So I can say, hey, I can pick the top 100 wallets that have been interacting with my stuff or going to my metaverse gallery and loving all of my work, or contributing ETH for a share, or tokens for a share of, a master that I have. And I can see those people and I can take them on a journey. I can drop them new things. I can drop them an NFT, which has a message on it. I can drop people all sorts of things. You can take people on a journey. So this is the real, this is a real opportunity as well. And anything you can think of in terms of disruption, which can benefit from a Web3 based business model, that's a big idea. You can just take it to an accelerator for a layer one blockchain, get some cash, and put a team together and try to build something in the decentralized space. Doesn't matter that you're from Iraq. Does not matter. This is the dream.
Quite interesting, and I think a lot of our artists, a lot of our entrepreneurs will be able to use such technology for their personal benefits and also for the community benefit. And I'm quite pleased to hear that, to be honest. You so of course you'll be available for our viewers if they have any questions. You can also, if you have any questions for Sana or for us, you can drop it in the chat box or in the comment section, and we'll reach out to you and explain whatever you want to be explained. Uh, Regarding the resources that people can learn from Web 3.0, are there any books, any platforms, any YouTube channels, anything basically that they can go into there? Uh, of course, this will be a starter for the journey, and for them to learn more and more about it later. Is there anything of that sort?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So again, I will share with Ahmed. There's several like curated reading lists, which are really amazing, which you can use to just shortcut your knowledge straight to the front, and then choose which areas you like and where to go from there. There are what's called learn to earn platforms as well, where you can be paid to learn more about the space. There's one called Rabbit Hole, which is rabbithole.gg, which is you earn their tokens for learning more and more in depth about the Web3 space. So Rabbit Hole is fantastic. I will also send these reading lists. There's a book called Token Economy: How the Web3 Reinvents the Internet. It's by a lady called Sherman Voshmija. Voshmija. She is fantastic writer. She wrote this 3 years ago, maybe four years ago even now, and it's still one of the most relevant texts that you can chew through today. And this is the thing with Web3 as well. It's like everyone who's becomes involved with it becomes vested in increasing the knowledge of people around it as well. So lots of the big VC firms like A16Z and these kinds of guys, they have huge lists of canon, which is, like the key reading they've compiled that they share. There's all these open resources. There's so many open resources. That's the fantastic thing. It's the open source ethos. So to get educated and even get paid to get educated as well.
That's quite a interesting list, and of course we will be sharing all of the reading list and all the resources and the links with our viewers. Will be on our platforms, and also you can message it to get more information. Osama, thank you so much for attending with us today and sharing all these informative, actually, slides and knowledge. And we would love to coordinate more on increasing the Web 3.0 space in Iraq. And if you have any last words that you want to share with our viewers.
I just want to say ahlan wa sahlan, shukran jazilan to every single person who's come to listen tonight. تعتذركم كل القوة من حجي. I love every single one of you guys. My inbox is open, and my heart is open. Like I was showing Ahmed before. Baghdad calling. So that's the flag that I'll fly.
Yeah. I'm quite sure that you're quite passionate about that, and we're also passionate about having you with us and having your knowledge. Thank you so much again. Thank you everyone for attending today's FLF, and see you again in our next FLF. Take care.